You came from Cornell to Princeton. Do you know who in Princeton hired you, so to speak? Was it John Morley?
I suppose it was everybody.
Yes.
Yeah. In the 59-60 year in Chicago, I had proved my first really good theorem, which was the theorem that if you take an H-space, and an H-space is just a space with a continuous multiplication with the unit. Well, this became a thing of great interest because of Hopf's theorem around 1940 that showed if it was finite dimensional and an H-space, its cohomology was an exterior algebra. And that had been generalized by Borel to mod P to say that the cohomology was a tensor product of exterior algebras and polynomial rings, truncated polynomial rings. And so it became a question. The Hopf's theorem, of course, applied to Lie groups, had already been done by hand by Élie Cartan, using the whole Lie group structure and maximal tori and so on. And he'd also proved, so he'd proved that it was an exterior algebra, and he'd also proved that the second homotopy group of a Lie group was zero. And so after Hopf's theorem, it became a question, for a finite dimensional H-space, would the second homotopy group have to be zero? So then I proved that, and by proving a very strong theorem about the torsion in the homology of an H-space, and related to the Bach-Stein spectral sequence. And it was a very neat little lemma that I got about the next Bach-Stein. If the first Bach-Stein was zero, then the next Bach-Stein had to do something.
The Bach-Stein spectral sequence.
Bach-Stein spectral sequence. And then a very elaborate technical argument to boost it up to proving that.
So this was 1960.
That was 1959, in fact, in the fall of 59. So I did it in Chicago, and I remember Whitehead was very pleased with that theorem too. And Frank Adams wrote a very nice review of my paper, my announcement. So I felt very good. I felt like I had done something substantial. My thesis, I thought, I was very happy with my thesis because it meant I would be able to work for a living. And it was okay. But this was something that other people had tried to do and not done. And I could do it. So I felt very happy with that theorem, and I'm still happy to this day with that paper. I thought it was one of my best papers.
So this study of finite dimensional H-spaces must have been your transition into questions in surgery also.
Eventually, yeah. Because that same paper in which I proved that pi 2 was equal 0 and all that, at the end, just as a kind of a footnote or appendix, I proved that a finite dimensional H-space satisfied Poincare duality. And I mused that everyone would have liked to prove that finite dimensional H-space was a Lie group up to homotopy and maybe some copies of S7 or P7. And at least I proved Poincare duality. So I speculated in that paper, perhaps one could prove that they're actually manifolds, if you couldn't prove that they were Lie groups. Well, then I had a paper with Spanier where I proved that a finite dimensional H-space is self-dual, which meant that the top homology was stably spherical. And then in 1961, I was in Berkeley, and Kerver gave a beautiful series of lectures exposing the paper of Kerver and Milner on groups of homotopy spheres. And I saw surgery for the first time. And I went back to Cornell. I said, I wonder if I could use that to prove that a finite dimensional H-space is a smooth manifold. And it turned out I could, to almost all, a big chunk of that. I could prove it with that. But it actually gave me a general theory of when a space would be the homotopy type of a smooth manifold. So
A simply connected space.
Simply connected, right.
Your talk at Aarhus in 1962 was about that, of course.
Yeah.
Why wasn't that talk published until very much later, even though it was obviously important?
It's an interesting question. Well, there it was in the Aarhus proceedings, after all.
Yes.
When I was working on H-spaces, I was very young, and I thought, oh my God, I better publish this right away. Somebody else is going to get this result. And later, of course, I found out nobody was even reading my papers, much less trying to prove the same thing. I got a little bit relaxed about publishing quickly. And then suddenly I got this theorem, and I was very happy with that theorem. And I think that was one of the main things that got me the appointment at Princeton, certainly. And I was lecturing to my students in Princeton and so forth. And of course, later I realized that everybody was working on it. H-space days, nobody was working on it.